Hello, everybody. It's the day before Mother's Day. Now, I usually talk about Eves. You know how I like Eves? I say it's Halloween, it's Turkey Eve, Birthday Eve. I don't know what Mother's Day Eve would it be. Mum's Eve? Let's do that one. You like Mum's Eve? I like Mum's Eve. So tomorrow is Mother's Day, and I started thinking about Mother's Day. Big picture, like the origin of Mother's Day and why we have to pick one day and say, this is the day for your mom. Now, I have some good stories. Hey, it's good to see you guys. I see some names popping up. So here's an interesting story. Number one, I recall Mother's Days of my childhood because we would always go to my grandmother's houses. Even though my mother was a mother of three, it was one of those things where on Mother's Day, and I'm talking about way back when I was a very little girl, we would get dressed up, and first we would go to my mother's mother, who I called Mama, and then we would go to my father's mother, who I called Abuela, which means grandmother in Spanish, but it sounds a little more dour, grandmother, Abuela. It's very formal. And then there were always flower vendors in Miami out on the street, and usually we would stop on our way and pick up some flowers. But it wasn't like a big thing, meaning, we didn't buy a lot of gifts. And maybe it's because although my parents were, well, my mother didn't get an education until later. She had a high school education, but then she went to nursing school in her 30s. And my dad was a young architect. And plus it's expensive having chicks on the side. But I don't remember them spending money on like fancy gifts for either one of my grandmothers. It was, street flowers and some love. And as a matter of fact, I recall my grandmothers preparing meals as opposed to us taking them out, which is why we went to my father's mother second, because she always made like big sloppy meals that would get all over your shirt. So you wanted to eat at her house right before you were going to go back home. She would make rabo encendido. That means tail on fire. Rabo is tail, encendido, literally like incendiary. And that was cow tails in tomato sauce, kind of a beefy, stewy situation. And you would, it was like a little bit like knuckles, a lot of cartilage. But rabos, back in the day when I ate meat, a good rabo encendido is a party. And she did make pork knuckles too from time to time. So like I say, it's the kind of stuff. Plus, it would hit you. That kind of food is a little bit like a tranquilizer. Like if you ever saw Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom, the way they would shoot, it was this fellow named Jim. He would always have to shoot the animal from a Jeep. And then you'd see the rhino would go a little bit, and then it would just go and fall over. And then Jim would have to jump off the Jeep and go and tag it and deal with it and whatnot. Marlon Perkins was the host. He didn't really have to deal with any of the wild animals. He had the better job. He just had like a cute monkey and I'm pretty sure he was drinking alcohol right off set. But that's my friend Cindy, if you hear any laughing in the background. I just got I think downstairs just texted me that somebody is, I think they have the wrong number. I don't know any, but hang on. I'm sorry, but this show is live. And the downstairs just texted me that there's somebody named Charana that wants to come upstairs. And I don't know. Shut up. Cindy's laughing very hard. This is Monique's biz phone. Biz phone.
Oh my gosh.
Monique. Sorry, I'm sorry for the interruption, but I don't want them to send somebody named Charana upstairs because it's probably, I'm going to be honest, in my building there's a lot of weed situations, and I think that sounds like a weedy name. This is Monique 4H. I think the guest is not for me. Sorry. I really do. Things like this never happen on a Zoom. I'll let them know so they'll know why they couldn't text that phone. Anyway, I can't even imagine who that is. So anyway, back to Marlon Perkins drinking a martini. See, I didn't even lose my train of thought. So that's kind of how my grandmother, when she would make rabo encendido, or I'm trying to remember what pork knuckles are in Spanish, but they're these gelatinous with a little bit of like rind and very delicious. But I'm pretty sure that they have a lot to do with the reason my grandmother and dad died young. So yeah. So I'm going to tell you right now, it's okay to occasionally eat pork or even rabo encendido. And in fact, we'll get back to Mother's Day in a minute. I used to actually eat tongue, lengua. And I remember a friend of mine saying, "Oh my God, I can't believe you eat cow tongue. I would never eat anything that was tasting me back." And I was like, "Are you kidding? That's the best part." So anyway, but Mother's Day became a bigger and bigger and bigger thing, to where when I worked in cosmetics in the 80s, the two biggest retail events of the year were Christmas and Mother's Day. I sold perfume, and Mother's Day, all the Estee Lauder counters, all the counters have stuff, for your mother. And I'm not going to lie to you. Mother's Day has never been important to me. Not that I don't love my mother, just that I feel like I don't like to get snookered into things. I don't like it to be like I've got to go to a restaurant with a pre-fee menu and spend a lot of money to show my mother that I love her. I'm actually an excellent daughter. I can look you guys right in the eye and tell you I'm a very good daughter. I do a lot of stuff for her all the time. And I think that when you kind of single out things like Valentine's Day, and they even have a thing in the Midwest, Sweetest Day. How is Sweetest Day any different than Mother's Day? Well, they just sell more candy. So I think what's really important tomorrow, at least for me, is I'm going to think about what my mother did to make me me. Because at the end of the day, if you don't think your mother's important, pretty much everybody that's ever laid on a psychiatric couch, they always, at some point, including Tony Soprano, who I know is a fictional character, but I'm just saying, or Betty Draper, again, fictional. But the point I'm saying is, they always say, does it really all come down to your mother? And I'm going to say, mostly, not all. But this is how I'm going to describe it for you. And if today isn't like the full hour, it's because it's show number 50. And when I tell you the week I've had, you'll be like, wow, because the world is opening up. But I'm continuing to spin plates because although the world is opening up, I am not going to stop this live stream. I'll do it on Sunday, and I've even done it on a Monday. I have not let the 330 down. I hit number 400 last Sunday. I hit number 400. Today was 406. I've missed 3 days in over a year, in over 15 months. That's madness. 14 months to get the tires retread. And I'm going to keep going because because that's it now. It's like, how many games did Brett Favre start before we found out that he was doing weird things with his pants off and his Crocs on? So that one really got you, huh, Cindy? So, I mean, you know, I'm not, I was not the recipient of the text, so I can't speak to that. But the rumor was that he had his Crocs on. I've heard the song "You Can Leave Your Hat On," but I've never heard anybody sing "You Can Leave Your Crocs On." So, so here's the deal. I think that all of us, you guys, because I mean, I'm not in this alone. This isn't like, you know, like live stream selfie. And I have news stories. I have news stories. I have, you know me, I always have to have like a good dog story. There's an excellent story about a dog rescue. Evidently downstairs got the message because they didn't retext me and say Chirana insists. So the weed's going to the other apartment. But here's the thing is that I have in the past done nice things for my mother for Mother's Day. A lot of it was because it was easy. I worked in cosmetics. There was a promotion going on. I just had to snag one with my discount and put it aside. But as I got older, I really thought about what your mom really wants. I'm going to tell you right now, you know what your mom wants? She wants time. She wants time in every sense of the word. Because the one thing I've learned, and I'm getting older, and I'm not a mother, but I'm an aunt and a dog owner, and that's not even close. And even that shows me mortality. You know, I see how my nieces are grown people. I can't imagine how I would feel if I was a grandmother and I had a daughter who was in her 50s and granddaughters quickly approaching their 20s. My mom will be 79 years old at the end of this month. And she still works, by the way, and enjoys it. She insists. See, so I got that from my mother. My mother feels about nursing the way I do about comedy. It's not a job, it's a calling. And she taught nursing for years. In fact, she has a building named after her in San Jose at Unitec College. She developed a nursing program there. And she would get irate when she would ask people applying for school, you know, why do you want to be a nurse? Well, because I'll always be guaranteed a job and it's good money. And believe me, nurses can really get messy because they're like doctors. Like they get used to things, they get inured to it. They never get comfortable with death or with things happening to children. But if you tell a nurse that, oh, I want to be a nurse because I'll always have a job and it pays well, they're going to tell you about impacted bowels. They're going to tell you about literally having to, you know, kind of get up there and and that you can't do that. You can't do that unless you understand the relief that you're going to afford that person when you help. Cindy's laughing very hard. But it's 79. Yeah. Yeah. I was reading the comment. My mom loves her job. She absolutely loves it. And she, you know, now she's in academia. She doesn't actually have to ever help anybody with an impacted bowel anymore. But she takes her job so seriously. She's so passionate about rendering comfort and aid and relief and support to people in their sometimes darkest moments. Or, you know, my mom was a hospice nurse for a while. She told me a story of this one woman whose husband died, you know, in the house, and the woman was waiting for the coroner and pretty much just asked my mom if she'd play like pinochle with her. Now, I don't think my mom knows how to play pinochle, so I'm sure they settled on another game. But my mom just played cards with the woman who was kind of in shock after so many years of marriage. She didn't cry, or she just wanted to play cards with another human being, you know? And that meant so much to the woman. And even though at times my mom's been a huge challenge as my mom, I know that my passion for comedy came from my mother being passionate about nursing. My father didn't want to be an architect. He was an architect. He was an excellent architect. And he started to love it after the fact. But my grandmother, his mother, was an incredibly domineering and difficult human. And she wanted my Uncle William to be an engineer, which he became for a brief period of time. He died at 27 years old. But my uncle was an engineer, and she wanted my father to be an architect, and she wanted them to open an office as brothers and work together and create some sort of building empire as, you know, the Marvez brothers. And my uncle died young, and my father was kind of left with this profession that he didn't love. He liked it, but he wanted to be a doctor. My dad was incredibly sensitive and a huge crybaby. I get that from him. And his mother, when you want to talk about influence, my grandmother wielded so much influence and power over my father. I remember being a little girl, and my grandmother would say to me as a joke, "Who is he?" And instead of saying my father or her husband, I would say, "He's your son." It was like a joke, like, you know, after she lost one son. And by the way, I can say all of this now because all the parties are dead. My dad was not her favorite. My Uncle William was her favorite. And she went into terrible, terrible grief. And I think she even sometimes was unkind in her sort of reminding my father, well, I mean, at least I got you, you know, at least I got you still. And my father struggled with a lot of self-esteem issues and arrogance and womanizing. I don't think my dad was a womanizer just because, for all the obvious reasons. I think my father was a womanizer as a result of trying to find somebody who thought he was the bee's knees. I think the fun, the adventure, the attraction, the sex was all a byproduct of just wanting someone to think that he was the good one, the preferred one, the exciting one, the smart one, the sexy one, the one that was wanted the most first. I really think that was his driving force. My grandmother was an enormous, looming figure in his life and thus in my life. And I think about her a lot because I think about the Mother's Days that we would go to her house and eat, you know, the pig knuckles. The name will come to me. There's a name for them in Spanish because I remember whenever she was saying she was going to make them, we would all say, don't make plans for the evening because once you eat those things, again, it's like you're the rhino out in the Serengeti and you get hit with the sleep dart because there's no moving with a belly full of gelatinous pork knuckles. But they are delicious, or they were, at least back in the day. So I think about the influence of the mother. You know, my grandmother, I was fortunate enough that I had 5 grandparents when I was a child. I had both sets of grandparents and a great grandmother who lived until I was in my late teens, early 20s. I didn't really interact with her in my early 20s because I moved back to Miami and she stayed in Houston. But my great grandmother, who I called Abuelita, Doña Barbara Nieves, who was born in the 1900s, I mean, in the 1800s. And I remember thinking to myself, born in 1962, I did the math once and asked her how old she was, and she told me. And I was like, you were born in the 18s. And my great grandmother always looked old. When I was a little girl, I did the math. She was the same age my mother is now. And my mom, you know, she's an older gal, but she's sprite. You know, she gets her little hair done and she wears fancy clothes from Chico's and a lot of jewelry, and she gets her mani-pedis. But my great grandmother, by the time she was in her mid-70s, she had just completely given up the ghost. She was just pretty much Yoda without the green eyeshadow. She had enormous Shimbolskis. She was very short and round. And I just remember one time seeing her bra in my grandmother's laundry room and thinking, oh my land, that thing's big. But she never had a full homestead once her children grew, because that's how it was generationally. My great grandmother just split her time between her three children. She had a room in all three of their houses, and it was understood that she spent the winter in Miami with us, and she split the fall and summer in Delaware with my Aunt Tony. And oh, thank you for. I mean, Elon Musk will be. Somebody just posted they're missing Saturday Night Live for me. I know Elon Musk is the host, but I'm sure that it's going to be rerun and replayed on every media outlet. Believe me, you're going to be Saturday Night Live Elon Musk to death. So thank you guys for saying you'll catch it tomorrow. Thank you, Martina. So I'm saying these things because think about generationally. Oh, I should host Saturday Night Live. Thanks for saying that. Think about generationally how in 2 or 3 generations the whole dynamic of parents and grandparents has changed, where the autonomy of older people now is so important to them, and especially after COVID. And what they really want from you is your time and attention. Because as they get older, they start to become very anxious and hear maybe a distant clock starting to tick louder and louder. And it's very important to them. I'm only saying this because my mom and I were never particularly close until the last few years. And she calls me many times a day. And it's not a, let me be very clear, it's neither a nuisance nor a bother. It's a privilege. I know that there's going to come a time when I'm going to wish that I could hear my mother read the phone book. Just to hear her voice will will have made me happy at some point. And I think that those of you who maybe are younger than me or have issues with your parents or think that your mother doesn't understand you or doesn't like you, been there, done that. It doesn't matter. And I'm saying that because if you're young or younger, there's always sort of an understanding of respect your elders. And I'm going to tell you a little something about respecting your elders between you and me, because my mom doesn't watch the live stream. You don't have to always like them, and you don't always have to agree with them, and you don't always have to think they know what they're doing. And there's a lot of times that because they're older, they may not know what they're doing, especially when it comes to computers. Or my mom still books air ticket on Expedia. Who does that? I have to remind her, like, Mom, don't do that. Just go to Kayak, look at the cheapest fare, and then go directly to the carrier. Like, don't order anything through a third party if you can help it. But other than that, for the most part, I find that older people now, and social media has helped with this, they're much more engaged with the world. They're much more engaged with each other. But there's nothing like the love and attention of a child to put miles back on the odometer or put time back on the clock. And I say this because sometimes they talk about things that are not particularly interesting to you. I'm not going to disagree with you. But at the end of the day, like, I've made a vow to be nice, which is not always easy for me because my mom talks about relatives that are important to her that I don't know. I really haven't spent a lot of time with them. Distant cousins and children of people that I haven't seen since my childhood. And because she keeps up with all of them, because that's what that generation did. The older generations cared more about extended family. We tend to be, in fact, my mother and her sister refer to our generation as of which I'm the oldest grandchild, the pod people, because they get married and they have children, and then they tend to just kind of stick with their own families, as opposed to extended families and cousins and family barbecues and reunions, all of which were important parts of my childhood. The Marvezes had a family reunion in Florida, usually somewhere like in Matheson Hammock or South Dades, south of Miami, the Keys, Isla Morada. We'd have these big family reunions. People would fly in from New York, and there'd be lots and lots of people. And all the Marvezes on Facebook are related. All Marvezes are related because it's a made-up name. We're pretty sure that it was Italian origin, which is Venezuela means New Venice. Venezuela was literally named after, Venice. A lot of Italian origin people in Venezuela, so they think that our last name was probably Marvez, and somebody cut the ZI off at some point. But whatever, we're all related, and we would have these. I remember in my early teens and later teens in the 70s and early 80s going to Marvez reunions, and there was a lot of Marvezes from everywhere. And now we only see each other. The last time I saw a bunch of Marvezes was at my Aunt Iris's funeral. And she was the last of the Mohicans of that layer of my father's generation. She was it on that side. And I say these things because I wonder how many of you really understand or have really put yourself in your parents' place to understand what it must feel like when the generation above you is gone, and then your generation, your cousins, your loved ones, are maybe slowly losing their minds or becoming feeble or wetting their pants. And that's if they're lucky. If they're lucky, they get to do those things. If they're not lucky, they're dead. And that's got to be peculiar. Because today, I read in the newspaper, so one of the news stories of today, that Tawny Katane died. Tawny Katane, yeah, I think it was Katane. And Tawny Katane was like, she was this beautiful girl who was in Whitesnake videos. Like when you hear Bowling for Soup sing about, I was going to shake my ass on the cover of Whitesnake. Like she was that person. She was beautiful. She was an actress. She was in some movies, but she was married to David Coverdale of Whitesnake, 59 years old. Well, that's not that much older than me, boys and girls. And she's dead today. It came out. And Tanya Roberts, dead. She was, Charlie, and then she was one of the Charlie's Angels, and then she did Charlie Perfume. I think she went after Shelley Hack. I think Shelley Hack was the original Charlie. And it's strange for me, and I'm not old, to think about people my age, generationally, actors and actresses and famous people that are dead. I mean, when I walk in a comedy club and they say, who do you want your intro music to be? I say, a sassy dead black person. And, Michael Jackson, dead. Natalie Cole, dead. Donna Summer, dead. Prince, dead. George Michael, not black, but he has a lot of soul, dead. My friend Allie Willis, excuse me, I was thinking of somebody else. Allie Willis, who wrote everything, September, the theme from Friends, dead. She was, I think, just 70 or 71. Not old by our standards anymore. And that's, I run with a pretty healthy crowd. Allie was, a healthy person. She was a little overweight, and I think it was a heart attack in her sleep. But the point I'm making is, your parents, in specific your mother, watch you grow, just as I watch my nieces. And it's a bittersweet thing, because they remember when you were little, and they remember how cute you were, and they remember how loving you were, and they remember how you believed everything they told you. And maybe there's a part of you who harbors some sort of bitterness because everything they told you wasn't true. And maybe they weren't a fabulous parent, and maybe they smoked weed, or maybe they gave you a stupid name, And maybe when they did those things, they were really genuinely doing the best they could within those circumstances of their own challenges as humans. Because at the end of the day, they're just people. And it's very hard for people to see their parents as just people. Your mother is a person who gave birth to you. That's who she is. Now, to you, she's the world in some ways, even if it's negative. because I've seen so many people, myself included, that so much of their life force is used either loving and being devoted to and feeling sad that they're away from their mother, or judging, being upset with, and wishing they'd behave differently or had behaved differently. I understand these behaviors, and I'm not judging you at all for feeling them. But take it from me, who's a little bit older than a lot of you and on the other side. They're just people, and they did the best they could. And on some level, they really didn't know how much power they wielded over you. Because interestingly enough, I think it's hard to reference how much power their parents wielded over them and put it into context and say, well, I don't want to be that person. In fact, I think it's quite the opposite. I think every single one of us has had a moment in our life where we said, oh my God, I'm turning into that person. I know I have, and I don't even have children. So before I get to the news stories, I hope I've softened up the ground, made it fertile enough, or primed the pump, or whatever analogy that I can use, that you'll see your mother in a different light. And maybe you'll find it in your heart to honor her. See, even in the Bible, it doesn't say love, it says honor. Not the same thing. It doesn't say light. It doesn't say hang around. It doesn't say talk boys or drink Cosmos. These are all good things, but not necessary. Honoring them is the necessary part. So take it from me. It hasn't always been easy for me. I'll be very candid, and my mom would back me up, except she always says, stop saying that. My mom didn't get me until I was 37. She really didn't like me because I'm not like her. Except I have an incredible work ethic. My dad, not so much. I am passionate about what I do. My dad, not so much. I'm kind. My dad, not so much. So when I really think about it, these are very important things. And they have a lot to do with who I am. And I don't know that I've given her enough credit. I mean, I do now. But I didn't see it that way. It's funny because in every other part of the world, I was a half full kind of gal. Except when it came to my mom. Then I was a half empty kind of gal. Not anymore. It's just not going to be that way. And I don't know how much time we have left, but she's pretty healthy. And I've completely influenced her. And there's no pork knuckles or rabo encendido in her life. Every once in a while, she'll eat a picadillo. Picadillo, is basically ground beef with whatever's left over in the fridge that you need to chop up and use. Garlic, sometimes it has raisins, bits of almond, whatever you got, olives, whatever you throw in it, so that it's basically like a super tasty, exciting, never the same way twice, sloppy Joe. Sometimes it's the same way twice if you're actually using the same ingredients because you read the recipe. But it's just a very good way to get rid of lots and lots of little vegetables and remnants, and it's delicious. I haven't had picadillo in a long time. And there's even another dish called ropa vieja, which means old clothing. And what that is sort of boiled in tomato sauce skirt steak, and then you tear it up. So that's why they call it ropa vieja, like torn clothes, old clothes. And ropa vieja is pretty delicious. But my mom doesn't eat any of that stuff because sometime in her late 60s, I showed her the ways of portion control and whole foods and more vegetables and et cetera, et cetera. So sometimes children get to influence their parents for the better. And I've been blessed that I've gotten to do that. And she lost weight in time for her knee surgery, and she got even healthier in time for her hip replacement, which I got to take care of her. And it was a privilege to take care of her, and we had a lot of fun. We watched Airplane together in her room, and we laughed so hard that my sister-in-law yelled at us that we were going to wake up the baby. By the way, Airplane holds up very well. All right, so I hope that I've given you some things to think about, and that tomorrow even if you don't drive around and pick up flowers. And by the way, I drove around today. There are plenty of people, mostly of Latino origin, selling every kind of flower and teddy bear and gift basket you can imagine on the street corners of Los Angeles, and probably where you are too. So whatever you do or don't buy her, and as the world opens up, more of us are able to do things. Don't just send her things. Don't just call very quickly and ask her how she is. Make it a point to FaceTime her if you can't be with her, or Zoom her. Just take the time to have face-to-face, long, mindful communication with your mother. That's what she really wants from you. I promise. I'm very good at these things. Okay. So, stories. Actually, they texted me down from downstairs. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I knew it. Okay, so this is one of my favorite stories of the week. And as you know, I like to keep it pretty light. Dog stuck on 98-foot cliff overlooking waterfall. Saved after rare and risky canine rescue. Now, I know that a couple of weeks ago, I did a story about a man using Google Earth to rescue a hiker who was stuck out in the woods. And you're thinking, you are obsessed with people stuck out on cliffs. Well, maybe it's because I'm afraid of heights and it's incredibly perilous. And the thought of being in a terrifying conversation and certain that you're going to die. They say there's nothing so wonderful as being shot at and missed, like the adrenaline of a bullet coming at you and then like, oh, they missed. So I can only imagine a bullet goes very fast, but the prolonged terror of being on a cliff thinking you're going to die only to be rescued, the amount of adrenaline and joy. So Canadian officials in British Columbia came to the rescue for one lucky dog. Logan Lake Royal Canadian Mounted Police and Logan Lake Volunteer Fire Department carried out a rare and risky canine rescue. A 7-year-old, nearly 80-pound dog named Chevy slipped on a trail with her elderly owners and ended up isolated on a ledge. How sweet, this dog's out there with her elderly owners overlooking 98-foot deep canyon and a river. So she's an American Bulldog Terrier cross and big. So what happened was Kyle Vanditmers, I hope I said that right. They developed a way of climbing down. They used climbing gear. They rappelled down next to the dog. Like they didn't lower something. A human tied in and rappelled down next to the dog, which would make you, very nervous. I rappelled once off a 30-pound cliff, off a 30-foot cliff, just 30 feet, 3 stories. I mean, for sure I would have broken some bones if I fell, but I was pretty secured in. I was terrified. I can't imagine going down nearly 10 stories. I prayed a lot, she told the outlet. That was Margaret Wickjard. That's the dog's owner. Between barking and she was crying, and then she got tired of that, and then she laid down. Now, when you say a dog is crying, there's a sound dogs make when they're in distress. And as a dog mom, when your dog is like, because Nola's made some sounds that just break my heart 52 times. Last summer, I had a bunch of decaying teeth pulled, and she was not comfortable. I can't imagine being a mother. I mean, back to the Mother's Day theme, my dog being in pain just shredded me. I can't even imagine having a child be in pain or be ill, let alone your child stuck on a cliff. So she said that after the rescue, that Chevy was very happy and jumping around and crying, and that the owner said that she went home and had a stiff drink. Well, just so you know, if you know anything about Canadians, they don't really need an excuse to go home and have a stiff drink. I mean, it's cold up there. They tend to drink. But the reality is the joy of having a dog that weighs 80 pounds lifted up almost 10 stories. This is not like a little Yorkie that went over, you know what I mean? And it's just like there. And then you could probably lift a Yorkie with a dog bone, like fishing. I'm pretty sure that if you put like a big dog, like a lump of dog treat, and you could reel them up, but not this dog. All right. So that was one of the stories I very much liked, was that they figured out how to rappel down and then get the dog and then lift the dog. Usually it's a helicopter situation. All right. This was a great story. And again, it involves a mom. I try to pick mom stories. A boy, 4 years old, orders nearly $3,000 of SpongeBob popsicles on his mom's Amazon account. He ordered 918 popsicles for a total of $2,618.85. 4 years old. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. A 4-year-old can't access Amazon. Oh, yes, they can. I mean, I don't know exactly how you get to the checkout, because sometimes I get confused trying to check out at Amazon. But evidently, this little boy had seen somebody do it enough times and wanted to and was a proficient reader. So I'm going to tell you something. As parents, this is a potential byproduct of sending your children to Montessori, like exposing them to learning and reading and math and iPads very early in life could result in $2,618.85 of popsicles. All right. It's all too easy to shop until you drop on Amazon. And a young boy from New York, figures, ordering nearly $3,000 worth of SpongeBob popsicles. Noah Bryant, 4, is a big fan of the cartoon Sponge. So he ordered it, and his mother, Jennifer Bryant, was none too pleased. They're non-refundable. Well, duh. My question is, where do you store 918 popsicles? Like, do you have friends? I mean, they're in wrappers. I'm going to think that even if they melted, you could refreeze. If you ate 3 popsicles a day, it would take you almost a year. If everybody in the family had a popsicle, mom, dad, kid, every day had a popsicle, that's a year. And you'd be very sick of SpongeBob popsicles, I'm guessing, after 90 days. The sweet treats are unfortunately non-refundable, inspiring a family friend to launch a GoFundMe campaign to cover the cost of the unsupervised shopping spree. Well, to be honest with you, I think that's kind of funny. I probably would have contributed like a couple bucks just because it's a laugh. On the fundraising page, friend and organizer Katie Schloss explained that Bryant, a mom of 3, is studying social work at New York University. Now let that sink in. You're a mom of 3. You're studying social work. I don't want to say this, but I don't know that I can control myself. Who studies social work? That is signing up. Like my mom is passionate about nursing. You have to really want to be a social worker. Like, that is not an easy job. It is a very challenging job filled with hardships and sob stories. On your best day, I can't even imagine your worst day. All I can think of social work is when I saw that movie Precious. I totally forget the whole rest of the title because it was a very long title. Precious, the blah, 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 push, what, I forget. But I saw the movie, and Lenny Kravitz was a social worker. And it even made him look glum and depressed. And Lenny Kravitz is ordinarily a pretty smoking hot guy, but not when he played a social worker in Precious. He looked like he really, he was the part. He looked like, you know. But here's the good news. The GoFundMe pitch went live on Monday, and $5,780 in donations poured in, smashing the original goal of $2,619. So here's what happened, because this is the world we live in, boys and girls. Karma is a wonderful thing. Thank you so much for your mind-blowing generosity and support, the mother said. Miss Bryant wrote in a follow-up note on GoFundMe. As a child living with ASD, that's autism spectrum disorder, all future donations will go towards Noah's education and additional supports. We cannot thank you enough, truly. How strange and wonderful and full circle is that? That a little boy with autism, who clearly is bright enough to order $3,000 worth of popsicles, turned out to be a left-turn blessing to his mother, because people understood the situation just as myself. and thought, you know what? That's kind of cute that you love SpongeBob that much. I'll give $2 to the cause. And now mom, who's studying social work, probably inspired by having a child on the spectrum, has a little extra money in her pocket to help with that particular genius child. Because believe me, if a kid at 4 years old can order $3,000 worth of popsicles, he is no dummy. He's going to be ordering the world around in pretty short order. All right. This story was a little bit interesting to me because narcissistic domestic abuse is a new thing. I'm not saying it's a new thing. I'm saying the awareness of it and talking about it is a new thing. Woman to run 285 miles in a wedding dress to raise awareness for narcissistic domestic abuse. I'm pretty sure it is what you think it is, but here's the story. Vanessa Reiser is a survivor of narcissistic domestic abuse, which is a form of domestic abuse by a narcissist. Now, duh. But anybody who's been involved with a narcissist, and who among us haven't? I mean, honestly, I'm not even being funny. Like, every single person has been involved with that person. And I remember telling someone whose name I shall leave out of the story, and I said, you know what? There's two people in this relationship madly in love with you, me and you. How true, how true. So this is how they describe it. Narcissistic abuse is an insidious form of domestic violence, she explains on a podcast. Narcissists generally will use the wedding or an engagement as a form of control and manipulation. They entangle you. And so the dress is a representation of how to do that, because she's going to run in a dress. Long before she was advocating against domestic abuse, Reiser, whose story was first reported in the Washington Heights Inwood Patch, says she was engaged to a diagnosed narcissist sociopath. Now, if somebody comes to you with that diagnosis, all of that's bad. Like narcissist, sociopath, and the fact that they were even diagnosed shows they already knew. And here it is, who had a history of abusing his partners. He left me in Cape Cod, and then I had to rent a car to get home, she explains. He padlocked me out of the house. A few months later, I left him, and he spit on me, called me a bunch of awful names, told me my dead dad was a loser, my father died when I was 18, and then he bleached all my clothing. Reiser claims her ex-fiance even attempted to get her kicked off the board of the Domestic Violence Center by claiming that she was abusing him. Now, this is going to take us full circle back to the now deceased Tawny Kitaen. Tawny Kitaen was involved with the lead singer of Rat. You know, Rat, round and round. I'm pretty sure that was Rat. And he called the cops on her and said that she kicked him in the face in a high heel many times. Like multiple times she kicked him in the face. And she was charged with domestic violence and had to go to anger management. Now, I've been yelled at. I've been very yelled at. Like, I had someone I was involved with that was like a drill sergeant. Like, he didn't just yell. He'd get like right up in my face and yell very mean things and curse words, bad curse words, and say very mean things to me. And my question, and I'm not being facetious, at what point, like, clearly this woman finally broke out and now she's running like Forrest Gump in a wedding dress. I get it. But going full circle, because I do believe that this is a feminine situation. I think people's ability to tolerate and or accept any form of abuse or lack of boundaries probably comes from the maternal side. Men they accept a different kind of abuse because men have the ability to ignore you. So you may think you're being a narcissistic sociopath, but they're just ignoring you. You can do whatever you want, and it's just Charlie Brown's teacher, wah, 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 wah. But for women, we take these things very, very personal, and we find a certain type of criticism rather than compelling us to leave. We find it crippling and frequently paralyzing. And I know a lot of you think like, you, Monique? I think that in my case, it wasn't that I was paralyzed or crippled or even felt that I deserved it. But again, having a mother who's a nurse, I think there was a part of me who thought that I could take the hit, chill a minute, and then potentially fix the situation. And I think that a lot of women feel, oh, they didn't really mean it. They're just having a bad day. They're just having a really bad day. Who am I to make their day worse if they're already feeling puny? I can take the hit and fix it. Well, if there's one thing that I would like to pass on that my mother did not pass on to me, I actually flipped the script and helped her in different relationships, and not even male, female, even with family members, close family members. You can't take the hit. You shouldn't take the hit. If your mother didn't teach you not to take the hit, let me tell you. I think a lot of you trust me. I think a lot of you like me. I think a lot of you respect me and believe me. And I think that if a person like Tawny Katane, who was very, very beautiful, and I'm sure lived an incredibly unsavory life, because they say that she went to a concert at the age of 14. 14! Let that sink in. And that she was incredibly cute. And she was allowed to go backstage and see what the VIP treatment was, and that she was bitten by the bug to be an entertainer. Well, let's be honest. She was never an entertainer. She was in a few movies and some videos that were probably exploitive. And I'm pretty sure if she went backstage at 14, it wasn't just to observe the VIP treatment. And I'm pretty sure that if somebody was paying closer attention to her, she wouldn't end up in a situation where she kicked somebody in the face countless times, had an ongoing, much documented drug problem and DUIs, and ended up dead at 59. So I'm going to ask you to do two things on this Mom's Eve. I'm going to ask you to mine the gold, as they say in the Bible, of all of the good things that you did get from your mother. And then, it sounds rough, I'm sorry, that you say, it does sound rough. She had a very challenging life. It's very well documented in the tabloids. It was rough. And if for whatever reasons your mother had challenges, dare I say demons of her own, and didn't fully equip you to live a life where you felt you were worth better than situations that challenge you and impede your growth and make you feel less than, then let me be the first person to tell you that maybe you like or respect or think is funny, or you showed up this Saturday night for a reason because you needed to hear these things. You are a wonderful human being, and you are a wonderful child. And I'm certain that your mom loves or loved you. And I'm certain that in whatever way she saw fit, she did the best she could for you. I promise you that. But at some point, it's not about them. It's about you doing what's best for you and becoming the stellar human beings I know you are. And if you have any spillover goodness, maybe you can pay it backwards instead of forwards, and find it in your heart to forgive your mom, or influence your mom, or teach her something new, or help her with her computer, or just spend more time with her. Because relationships are important, and the relationship with your mother is probably, whether she's with us or not, how she sits in your memory. And what you decide to do with those thoughts can have a very, very huge impact on your trajectory going forward. And as the world starts to open up and I go back on the road and I spend more and more time meeting some of you and spending time with you and hearing your stories, I want them all to have a happy ending, okay? So, happy Mom's Eve. And I don't have any children of my own, but I'm absolutely blessed with amazing nieces and a dog and a whole lot of people younger than me that think that my mom must have done something kind of right. So until next week, or tomorrow at 3:30, or at one of my performances, or on the street somewhere. Until then, you guys know the drill. Love hard, forgive harder, and get as happy as you can, as fast as you can. Good night, guys. Love you to pieces. Happy
Well, that's neat.